This is a 96 Honda Civic, 1.6 liter in it. It has like 142,000 on it. And it's got a problem with the bearing making noise out on the drive pulley area. And check the idler pulley. Turns out it's the air conditioner pulley. The idler bearing's bad in it. It's noisy. I need to find out what size the bearing is to replace it with an aftermarket one. This is a Sanden compressor. There's 3 different bearings for it. And so I gotta take the pulley off of it to find out which one it is. Sanden's got those row of bolts in a circle and a nut out on the end holding the clutch plate on instead of a bolt head. Take a 14mm wrench or socket, whatever you want, and break that hold down bolt loose, and take a 10mm and back this duster bolt off far enough to get the belt off of it, which it has to get pretty far to do it, and let the belt hang off of all the pulleys off that engine mount down there. I put a jack underneath the towing hook on the driver's side and raised the car up so that the wheel's about 3 or 4 inches off the ground. Set it on a jack stand on the lower control arm. Then from underneath you can get to the top 12mm bolts holding the air conditioner compressor on. I took the top ones loose. I'll take these 2 bottom ones loose. Local car repair stores, you can get a tool. It's like a 3-way that fits them holes to hold that while you break it loose. I just took and put an impact on the nut and zapped it off. I went ahead and I hooked the jumper wire from the battery to the single wire plug-in and charged this coil and put a strap wrench on the pulley part just in case, but it didn't cause any trouble. I had a ground wire on it just ready to go if it needed it, but it was touching the housing enough. And that's really nice. Right to the engine mount. It's got a snap ring around the outer edge that has to be released. There's the eye holes on the bottom. Open that snap ring up and pull the snap ring off, and then that whole thing will slide off of there. Now be careful, there's little washers here and there's shims to keep this right distance from this pulley. And there went the clip. There's one on this one, there could be 2, just depends on how far you need it shimmed out away from that. That controls the gap of the clutch. There's one washer, it'll have to be reinstalled or it'll drag this pulley all the time. and nobody wants that. Okay, the clip's off. You could spray some penetrating oil if it gives any trouble. There's only one little sham on it. The clutch is a little rough, but not too terrible for 100-some thousand miles. This should pop off of there, but it may be sticky from where the retaining clip has been against it for years. Let's take a couple of chisels and work at the top and bottom and walk that off of there. I'm just taking a chisel and hammer and getting behind the lip on the belt part, but pointing it toward the center to pull in, not so much sideways. Very little, so I don't chip a chunk out of that pulley. Hit it with a hammer. You have to watch, it's going to drop out of there. You're ready to catch it. It's made quite a bit of progress. It's probably halfway out of it now. I'm going to set a big pile of shop towels underneath of it directly on the floor. Then go up top and hit on the back side of it. That should drop it. Well, it did work the top. I kind of tilted it toward the bottom now. It's pretty deep. It's close. I've got a pile of rags for it to fall into so it don't bust it. And a box. And you can use a puller on this as long as you put a spacer on the outer part of that inner bearing on the aluminum tube. And probably take this inner wheel well plastic out to get a shot at it. Like that. Ooh. You have been hot. And that's the bearing. Yes, sticky. That's the bearing need to replace there. So it probably needs some air conditioning clutch coil. Looks like that's been hot. Shouldn't be able to see any copper lines in it. It's crispy. Still functional though. See, it's recessed in here and popped up out here. If you want to change this coil, you have to take that snap ring out back there and then pull this coil off. It comes up in the same fashion. Comes off. Yeah, that'll be a fuse blower one of these days. Rougher than a cob. It's not even wanting to turn on the bearing. Okay, the bearing's staked in by those smashed pieces of metal in a circle. I'll stick it in a press and press it, and it'll rip those right open with any luck. I'm using a 2" 3/4" drive socket to support this while I press the bearing out. A 12-point. I'd say maybe a ball joint press spacer might fit this pretty good. Like that. I used a 3/4" drive deep well 1/16 to press it out with. And the little stakes are straightened out. And that's the problem there. It's rough. Really hard to turn. I should just fly. And I'll have to see what size. This isn't the Nip and Denso, it's the other one. That's the part number. It's an NGK. I put a little light coating of thin oil on the outside of the bearing. It came with some lube on it. And inside of the sleeve it goes in. I'll take a hammer and just tap the outer perimeter of this to get it started square. And I'm going to stick it in the press. I'll be supporting the center hub here, so as not to damage this outer part, because it's wore a little irregular, and you don't want to, this thing's cast iron, you don't want to crack it or disturb the outer parts. I'll be supporting it in this area here. Something I found that fits that pretty good is an old bearing race. Fits it pretty good. I suppose a socket or anything, as long as it's sitting on this inner part. I don't want to stick it in the press. And I'll just lay the old bearing on top of it. Press it down in there. Put a big washer or plate over this. Say a socket that's that size would do it. So long as you don't damage this grease seal or the pull with the inner part too much. I'll take a hammer and get this started and squared up a little bit on this outer perimeter. Not hit this inner part. Let's make sure it's square. That's got him down in there enough to do it. On a 3/4 inch drive deep well socket that was the perfect size to press that bearing in. It's just a fraction smaller than the bearing, and it won't hit the grease seal on it. And it's down. Good. It's all the way against the back. Now I gotta take a punch and lay this on a piece of wood, this front, and stake this in about 8 places to keep this pulley in place. It doesn't have a retaining ring on it, it's just staked in there. See the old stakes there. I take a 36mm socket. It fills that bearing area in on the inside of the race, but still makes contact with the metal and not smashing the grease seal down. I run a bolt through it, a couple washers, so I don't damage the seal when I'm staking this. That'll keep this punch from shooting off into the grease seal with any luck. Looks pretty good. The bolt head was sticking out a little bit, and I put a big fat frame washer underneath of it. As long as you don't damage the outer part, because that turns inside of that coil. I'll take a screwdriver and chip away for any loose pieces so it don't get caught in the workings. Not sure about that one there. I really only need about 4 of those in there. I don't know why there's so many, but it'll probably stay put without any of them, but I'll go ahead and do it. And that's what it's supposed to do, smooth. It's a little stiff, but the new one's going to be. Wipe any dirt off in here or any lubrication used to get the bearing in. Dry any dirt particles off from around this. Degrease this if any lubrication got on the face of it. You could scuff out with some sandpaper if you wanted to. It's not too much, just clean it up a little bit. I wouldn't really want the sand getting down there. Do it face down. And I'll hit the face of this clutch plate with this, just to knock some of the rust off. Looks like it was predominantly catching in the center instead of this outer part. That made it a little more grippy. It's supposed to be a maximum of 0.06 of an inch clearance between this outer plate and the pulley. I think a minimum 1/1000 to 0.06. And that shim, which is just a washer, changes the height of this. It's definitely a little more grippy with I sandpapered that in a cross fashion. And now to push this back on the air conditioning compressor. I took some 400 grit sandpaper and just went around this where the snap ring mounts before I installed this pulley. I just took a block of wood, tapped it on its side. It was just kind of up against the exhaust in the back, and it went pretty good. Just make sure not to hit your shaft or you'll damage the compressor inside or mess these threads up. And now that that's all the way back and not making any noise hitting anything, and put the snap ring back in there. I've opened the snap ring up and got it part way in there, but it's not seated. It's got a big gap in the back of it here. Take a screwdriver and slip it in. Just be sure not to tear up your grease seal and your bearing. And to massage the snap ring in, I put it back in the exact same way it came out, but it didn't want to settle back here. I just raised up on the screwdriver and then walked a pulley around it. I'm supposed to use a new one, but it'll be alright, I reckon. Now stick your shim on. Now this clutch plate. Probably going to have a sweet spot on it somewhere. It has a double spline missing here, and it has the same pattern in here to match up with it. Just make sure your shim don't fall out. You spin this pulley, just get it on back pretty good. Spin that pulley and make sure it's not making any contact with the clutch anywhere. I'm going to put some blue Loctite on this threads on this nut. It torques to 13 foot-pounds. Let's say I just use the coil to hold this. Put a strap wrench on it. It's got a good bite on it. Run 12 volts to the plug-in on it, but not for very long. You want to leave it like that more than a minute or two. It might get hot, it might not, I don't know. It's tight now. This is a Sanden compressor with all the bolts around it in a circle, and it's got this 14mm nut where the Nip and Denso has a bolt in it, like a 10mm bolt head. And just put the bolts back in it, put the belt back on it, tighten the tensioner pulley up. Wrap your belt around all the pulleys and slip it up onto the tensioner pulley, idler pulley, whatever you want to call it. Make sure this hold down bolt is just loose enough to let it slide up it. And re-tightening it down, checking the slacking up periodically. pretty good. The little thing doesn't take too much. Once you tighten the nut down, that's going to tighten it a little farther. I like a little bit of play in it. If it's too tight, it's hard on the pulleys and the bearings. This hold down nut, bolt, whatever in the middle here tightens down to 40 foot-pounds. And you should have air conditioner noise free now. And plug your harness back together if you unplugged it. There's a little plastic spacer that goes in there. Don't forget it. Goes down in that. Or don't lose it if it fell out.